Three, two, one. We have ignition. Shabbat shalom, everybody. My name is Noel Joshua Hadley. This is the Unexpected Cosmology. I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to show up. Drink a little coffee here to stay awake. And starting out, there's a few things I wanted to go over with you guys. First and foremost, of course, we are going through the Paleo-Hebrew, or a Targum of the Paleo-Hebrew, obviously an English translation from the Paleo. And we went over this last week. There'll be a few things I want to refresh with you guys this week. Good to see all the old faces here, new faces, old faces. Great to see all of you. Now, let's see here. Oh, Pamela, Miss Pamela. This translation comes through her, and she has been feverishly at work to get the entire Torah made into one translation. We will release that book within the next 9 months or a year when she does finish it. And for those of you who have purchased a copy, now we're on the Sabbath, so I'm asking you guys, please do not purchase a copy. I'm not trying to make a sale on the Sabbath. We're just talking about the how you can get your own copy. There's a link under this video under Patreon in which you can go, and believe it or not, Patreon has its own store. So there is a download on Patreon where you can go on there. You can get BARASHAYATH, her Genesis translation. Now, without a doubt, there's going to be, one of the reasons I would recommend you do this, of course, you can follow along on the screen, but this also helps support Pamela for her efforts. I mean, no one's paying her to do this, right? She is taking her time, devoting her life to doing this. And this is one of the ways by getting a copy, you can help support her. Now, this is all part of the translation process. So inevitably, she is going to go back and make some changes to Genesis that's going to happen. I mean, it's all part of the translation process. As she learns more and comes into greater knowledge, the depth of knowledge, she's going to go back and make some edits. And in those instances, when we upload a new copy, anyone who has purchased a copy, we'll make sure you get the updated version. So there's no problems there. All right. Now, as I mentioned last week, a fun surprise tonight. If I make it through, of course, this is kind of like an oral test for me. I don't have notes in front of me. I'm just talking to you guys. I got the microphone here. I got the video camera. Studied all this material, and hopefully I passed the test for you guys. I don't freeze like a deer in front of headlights. I was reviewing the video from 2 weeks ago, like the first YouTube live. Now, I've made, hundreds of videos by this point and spoken to groups and stuff, but it was my first time on YouTube live, and I hit the live and I'm like deer in front of headlights. Like, I'm live, guys. So hopefully it came across a little bit better tonight. I hope you guys can, consider making this a part of your tradition, your Sabbath tradition with your family, to come over here, listen live. And that's the other thing I wanted to explain. I had gone through these directions so many times, and I listened to you, the viewers, and people of this ministry. And when I started at 7:00 Eastern time on a Friday, that made it impossible for most people on the West Coast. I mean, most people work a job, you got to drive home, commuter traffic, get dinner. There's no way you're doing that. And so I decided to bump this up to 9:00. We're going to start 9:00 Eastern every week, see how this goes. That gives people on the West Coast a fighting chance, get home by 6:00 so they can start this. And also, we just spent the last 2 hours in my Discord group having a community open discussion fellowship. It was a great time. And I just love sitting there listening. I jumped in on a few points and made some talk, but mostly listen to you guys. So I encourage you guys to come over to Discord. And so next week we'll do this as well. 7:00 Discord live. Go in there, have a conversation, come over here afterwards and do our thing. Oh, and the surprise tonight, if I can get through this, is we're of course talking about Noah's flood. And what I wanted to do is read from the Kolbrin about that version, the flood of Noah according to the Kolbrin. And it's wild. It's really, really interesting. So hopefully we'll get there tonight. But like I said before, I want to really focus on the Paleo. I want to focus on Pamela's translation of the Paleo and fight my temptations to want to go off and source all this other material. So, last week you were all very kind, and I was kind of talking about a lot of extra biblical scripture. And when I do that and I don't source the material, most people are like chapter and verse, and I agree with that. If you guys know my work, I like to line up scripture and, then comment on it. I wasn't doing that. I was quoting from the Paleo and then, throwing other stuff out there. I'm going to do that again tonight too. So you can take my word for it, or you can search it out for yourself, and let's get right into this. I ended last week with, and this is probably part of last week's Torah portion, but I wanted to go over this really quickly. The corruption of mankind in BARASHAYATH chapter 6. And this is what we read. But when corrupt men increased upon the surface of the earth, the arats, and sons and daughters were born to them, then the sons of the Alahayam admired the daughters of men who were beautiful, and they took to themselves women from all they desired. Now, of course, when they are taking these women from all they desired, the idea is that they're taking something that they desire. They're not asking permission, guys. Like I'm assuming a lot of husbands are being killed off for them to do this. Consequently, Yahweh, the ever-living, declared, "My Ruach shall not call out to man forever, for he is sinful flesh, but they shall have 120 years. And then the Nephilim, were upon the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of the Alahayam had intercourse with the daughters of men, and they bore them mighty men, who were men of renown of very long life. And Yahweh, the ever-living, saw that the sin of..." I have to remove your comment there, Crazy Chicken Boeros. People aren't going to be able to follow along. "And Yahweh, the ever-living, saw that the sin of Adam increased upon earth, and it grieved his heart. Yahweh therefore said, I will sweep away Adam, whom I created, from off the surface of the earth, from man to beast and reptile and birds of the skies, for I regret that I made them. But Noah, found favor in the presence of Yahweh, the ever-living." So want to quickly go over this again, and this is a very controversial point. Some people are going to kick and scream at this, and maybe they're correct, and maybe Pamela and I are wrong. I went over this last week, and I explained that we're seeing here, let me just scroll up, we're going to see the interplay in Genesis between Alahayam, and right here we see Alahayam. Let me underline this for you. Boom, there it is. It's all capitalization. And Pamela does this in order to emphasize the father. Okay, this is Alahayam, the father. So the sons of Elohim, sons of God, sons of Alahayam, they came down to the earth. But then we see his son, Yahweh, the ever-living. This is the son of the Most High, Alahayam. And this is the controversial point. I mean, anybody who is within the scope of Christianity, or any of the runoffs of it, are going to agree there is a father and a son. But to state that the entity we know as Yahuwah or Yahweh, or some people know him as Jehovah, that actually is Yahushua HaMashiach, or for you Greek fanboys out there, Jesus Christos. That causes some people to spin their heads. But for me, as I'm looking into this, it makes absolute perfect sense. And that the individual who cut a covenant with Abraham, who spoke with Moshe and so on and so forth, and brought forward the Father's commands, is the very Mashiach who walked this earth and died so that the covenant could be fulfilled. All right. Moving on, the history of Noah. There was something I was going to say. Oh yeah, I wanted to say one more thing before we get too far into this. See, I need more coffee. Hold on, guys. Give me 1 second. That just charged me right there. This is what I remember wanting to say. I've been wanting to get Pamela to come on, the translator of this text. And what I'm hoping is, now I don't know if I can get her on every week, maybe once in a while, once in a blue moon, once a month. I don't really know. But I want to bring her on and maybe just have an interchange between her and myself. She's actually in the chat right now. You might see her, making comments in there every so often, and explain why she translated the way she did, and so on and so forth. Now she is finishing Sukkot, and so this is she's actually on the full moon, is the new moon. And I have to say, guys, I have not had a hard position on the calendar. I've taken a pretty soft position here as a ministry, and I'm still not sure on what calendar to go with. But I think this next year I'm going to commit to the full moon being the new moon. I think that is a legitimate position to take. You guys may recall I brought Lisa on probably like 2 years ago now. It's been a long time, and she gave a whole presentation on why she believed the full moon was the new moon. And so, yeah. Anyways, she's finishing Sukkot, and when she finishes, I think maybe next week she might plan to come on, so something to look forward to. All right. The following are the genealogies from Nuke. This is going to be hard. It's hard. It might be Nooch, but I'm just going to say Noah, so you guys know who I'm talking about. This is going to be hard with some of these name changes, and I want to get them right. Noah was a good man. He was upright in his age. Noah walked with the Alahayam, and Noah had 3 sons given to him, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But the earth was corrupted in the presence of the Alahayam, and Ha'aratz, or the earth, was full of crime. And Alahayam looked upon the earth, and behold, saw its corruption, for all men had corrupted their way upon the earth. When we get to, I might actually read this now. I told you I was going to try to avoid a lot of extra biblical books, but I can only do it for so much. So this is really interesting because for those of you who are in the Book of Britain study, you will recall when we read a couple chapters in there on Yahushua HaMashiach, and he talks about the end days. And as you know, that the end days is like the days of Noah. And the way he described it, you know, we have these all these different ideas as to what this corruption looks like, and I don't want to step on any like Nephilim research or anything like that. But without getting too extreme in this, just from a very bare bones, you know, exoteric kind of view, the way he describes this, the days of Noah, is exactly like the world today. I mean, just shockingly, just like the world today. So let's just read this real quick. I want to read you guys from a physical book here, so you can't see it on the screen. A Roman soldier, he asks Yahushua, he says, "Tell me, good master, when shall the end be?" And Yahushua answered, "There will be an end to the beginning, and men will know this by the spirit of the times." And the way what he's actually describing here is, I believe, cyclical. Like there's not just an end. I mean, there was the end leading up to times of Noah, and then there's been other multiple ends throughout history where we see repeated themes, and we're seeing it right now. We're getting ready for another huge societal collapse and a reset, and we don't, of course, know what is going to be on the other end at this point. And he says, "Men will no longer be as brothers, nor will they be manly." So none of that toxic masculinity anymore. "Women will be as men, and men as women. Adultery will not be condemned, nor will fornication. Therefore, these will flourish. Men will not honor their homelands, and there will be no discrimination among them." And we see that, of course, we'll be talking more about that tonight with the Tower of Babel. Don't want to get into that too much right now, but the idea that mankind was given this inheritance all around the world by the different genealogies. And, you know, there's, when you don't respect that, when you're just, you know, sending in these militant, militant age foreigners from, you know, the Middle East and Africa and all these places, South America, all to these different cities and stuff like that, the total invasion, right? So men will not honor their homelands, and there will be no discrimination among them, nor will they maintain the purity of their races. Fathers will not be honored, nor mothers respected, and children will be raised to be wayward. Perversions will be encouraged, and criminals will mock the law. I mean, we see this every day now, like on social media and such. There will be incest and rape, and it will be unsafe to walk around, definitely in the cities for sure. Who wants to go to like Chicago right now? Floods, famines, droughts, and earthquakes will cause death and destruction. And one of the things that I highlighted in my study in Bezorah Kifa was that earthquakes are connected with angelic activity. And I would say even volcanoes and a lot of that kind of stuff too. I mean, tornadoes, all that kind of stuff. But the idea of when an earthquake happens is that there is spiritual entities coming down to the earth, perhaps fighting with each other, whatever. And so as we see all these earthquakes happening, it's a dualistic approach to the material and the spiritual. It's an increase in the material, but it's also an increase in the spiritual for our souls, right? There will be, strange sicknesses will smite the people, and there will be a denial of Elohim. Babes will be slain in the womb. Men will lust after the wives of other men, and marriage shall lose its meaning. Women will go to the marriage table unchaste and will deceit in their hearts. Their husbands, creatures of pity, will hear the mocking voices of laughing men. Priests will defile their altars with their impurity, and the rulers will be held in little repute. And of course, the rulers today are held in little repute by basically everybody. Like, you don't have to be woke or, a truther or anything to like people who are still holding their politicians in reputes. I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with them spiritually at this point. It is not Elohim who marks the end days, but men who live as though setting a pitfall for himself. So quick little thought there on the days of Noah and how we can see very practically that we're in them again today. And one of the ways you can think about the whole world being corrupted is just the marriage, the union of Ruachoth, which we went over a little bit on Thursday night with the Book of Wisdom. And just the fact that, men and women, their roles have been interchanged, and you can't even define what a man or a woman is at this point anymore. So Allah Hayam declared to Noah, I will wipe away men from my sight, for the earth is full of crime from their presence. I will accordingly sweep them from the earth. Make therefore yourself an ark of pitch pine. Fashion the ark with docks, and pitch it inside and outside with pitch. You shall fashion it thus. It shall be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits deep. Fashion a ventilating window fixed in a turrets of a cubit above the upper deck, and connected with that, make an opening in the side of the ark on the second and third lower decks. You shall make second and third decks, for I myself will bring a downrush of waters upon the earth to sweep off all beings possessing the breath of life from under Ha-Shamayim, so under the heaven, all that move upon the land. Then I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark yourself with your sons and your covenant woman, and your sons' covenant women along with you, and from every animal of all kinds. 2 of each shall go into the ark to live with you. They shall be male and female. Of birds by their species, and of animals by their species, and of reptiles moving on the plain by their species. 2 of each shall accompany you, so as to preserve life. And you shall take with you all kinds of food which is eaten, and store it with you, and it shall be provisions for yourself and for them. Noah accordingly did all the Allah Hayim commanded him, he accomplished it. All right. So here, once again, we're going to see an interchange, because we saw Allah Hayim, the father, commanding Noah, but then we see the action on the earth from Yahweh. So afterwards, Yahweh, I gotta scroll this down so you can read that. There you go. Afterwards, Yahweh said to Noah, go yourself and all your household into the ark. For I have seen that you have been righteous in the face of this generation. Take with you all clean cattle, 7, male and female, and of the beasts which are unclean, 2 of them, a male and a female. Also from the birds of the sky, 7 male and female, so as to preserve a seed of life upon the face of the ground. And Noah did all that Yahweh, the ever-living, instructed him. Noah was 600 years old when the downrush of water came upon the earth. I just watched I don't need to talk about that. I have actually, I don't argue with people. I have actually lost social media friends on this one, because they are so against the idea of clean animals, because, all animals are clean, right? So by saying that there are unclean animals, then that's a problem for them, right? Because then they can't eat it. And I pointed out, and they'd say that, well, the clean animals just came from the Torah, from Mount Sinai. And, you guys all know, you point this out right here, and it clearly says 7 clean, male and female, indicating 14 total of that species of animal. And I was just watching a couple of months ago now, an Answers in Genesis video. They tried to address this issue, and they danced, like they skated around the entire issue. I couldn't believe, like, watching the mental gymnastics. They were actually capable of doing it. For all the normies out there, they were able to talk about this entire passage and never once lead the viewer to know or understand that there was a difference between clean and unclean animals. I couldn't believe how shockingly masterfully they did it. Noah with his children and covenant woman and the women of his sons with them went accordingly into the ark from the face of the waters of the deluge. In Pamela, I love how she puts in here covenant women a lot. I love that. And we're going to see it with the rainbow. I think she talks about the women of Noah and his sons being covenant women again. And we're going to see that with the rainbow, that the rainbow is a sign of the covenant, right? So there's actually there's a connection between the man and the woman getting married and the covenant with Yahweh, with Adam and his children. Noah with his children and covenant woman and the women of his sons with them went accordingly into the ark from the face of the waters of the deluge, with the clean cattle and with the unclean cattle, and with the birds and all that crawls upon the field, who came 2 by 2 to the ark, male and female, as Elohim had directed Noah. When the 7 days had passed, and again, like you're seeing here, like, I'm sorry to keep pausing on you guys, but it's the commands of the Father, right? And who obeys the commands of the Father? Yahushua HaMashiach, right? He is our Messiah, because he perfectly embodied the commands, and he followed them and told other people to follow him. And this is what we see. Elohim commands, and Yahuwah learns from the Father. He hears from the Father, and he comes down and he does what the Father says to do. And he's, making sure that Noah is following the instructions. When the 7 days had passed, then the downrush of water came upon the earth. Now, this is kind of interesting that, they don't really comment much on the 7 days here. Yasher is a very controversial book, and people will talk about the rabbinical elements in there, which is meaningless to me. And you guys know my theory. I've talked about this a lot, that Moshe is writing a book. He's stitching together a family quilt, right? He's telling the Hebrews in the wilderness, this is your family. I'm showing you guys your descendants going all the way back to Adam. And there might have been, other humans aside from Adam, but that's not their forefather. It's Adam, right? We're leading all the way back. And he's sourcing material from books that existed. Like I said last week, the Hebrews weren't wandering through the wilderness. They learned to read and go, I can't wait till somebody writes a book so that we can finally read a book. Oh, Moshe finally finished the Torah after, all these years. Finally we can read a book. Like, it didn't work like that. I think that they had tons of books they were carrying with them out of Mitzrayim when they sacked the place. They were reading all about world history. It was probably drained from that point. I mean, they had world history as far as I'm concerned. And so anyways, he's mentioning little tidbits here and there that they would have known in other books. And of course, Jasher would have been written right around the time of right before Joshua, right? So kind of after the Torah, before Joshua. And you learn in there that the 7 days, interestingly enough, is the mourning for Methuselah. Methuselah dies, and the floodwaters come 7 days later. And so those 7 days, they're mourning for Methuselah, but it's also giving the world time to repent in those 7 days. Really interesting how that worked. I think the movie, was it the Noah movie? They had they had Methuselah. Was it Anthony Hopkins that played Methuselah? I can't remember, but I think it might have been Anthony Hopkins. Great Methuselah. and he actually dies in the flood. He puts his arms out like this, and he closes his eyes to embrace the flood as it comes and takes him out. And if only they could find a fossilized man like that, just like arms out, eyes closed, and be like, hey, it's Methuselah. But no, he was dead, buried in the ground, and he would have gone to Sheol before he would have been carried by the angels to Sheol by the seventh day before the flood water hit. So when the 7 days had passed, then the downrush of water came upon the earth. In the 600th year of the life of Noah, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the depths of the great ocean were heaved up, and the belts in the Hashamayim in the heavens were broken, and there was a downrush of water onto the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. I probably don't have to explain this to you guys, but you never know. I just throw this out there that they're not talking about the clouds here, right? It's not the clouds that opened up that drowned the world. It's literally the waters you have the waters above the firmaments, right? They're opening up the windows and the firmament, it's coming down. And then you got the waters coming up from below us as well. At the close of that day, Noah, along with Shem, Ham, and Japheth, sons of Noah, and the covenant women, or the covenant woman of Noah, and the 3 women of Noah's sons along with them entered the ark. They themselves and all the animals according to their species, and all the cattle according to their species, and all birds by their species, every winged fowl. There also came to Noah into the ark 2 by 2 from all creatures which have animal breath. Thus they came, male and female of all creatures, as Elohim had directed them. And who shut the door? Yahweh shut him inside. And this is one of those things that I've heard even Trinitarians and others who they don't accept that Yahuwah or Yahuwah or Yahweh is what they would call Jesus or Jesus or Yeshua or whatever. They'll say that that Messiah is the one to go close the door, right? I've heard that in so many Bible studies, and yet right here it says Yahweh was the one that shut them inside. So I actually agree with that point. And the son of Elohim, who became Messiah, the anointed one, is the one that actually shut them in. That's a really comforting thought, of course. The downrush continued 40 days upon the earth, and the waters swelled and lifted up the ark and raised it from off the land. And the waters overwhelmed and rose greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated upon the surface of the waters. The waters overwhelmed the land and covered all the hills and mountains which are below the heavens. The waters covered the hills 15 cubits, and all the animals that moved upon the land expired, with bird and cattle and wild animals, and every insect swarming upon the land, and every man, all which breathe the ruach of lives in its nostrils, with all that was in the dry land died. I've been really curious in this idea. I want to let everybody know so that nobody freaks out. What is Noah going to throw at us next? That I believe there was a worldwide flood. All right. I mean, every source that I can read, every extra biblical source, they all say a worldwide flood. And in fact, the very idea, the very notion that you see stories of a worldwide flood all across the world attest to the fact that it was not a local flood, because if it was a local flood, you wouldn't have people all over the world from all nations talking about their ancestor who survived this, right? So clearly this is a worldwide flood. And I say that because I've been really trying to understand how in the world people are coming to that conclusion that this is a local flood. I mean, it's very clear here that the waters rose above the highest mountain. I don't know, everything with the breath of life died. Thus he swept away the whole. People will point out a lot, the giants before and afterwards. But I think that the problem is that we're taking the Enoch account of the watchers coming down and taking human wives and saying that was a one-time event. Personally, I believe that when we're talking like the Anunnaki, that the Anunnaki, it was actually the Watchers event in Enoch was a repeated event. It wasn't a first-time event. The Anunnaki probably did the same thing before the last creation event, ancient history. And so we would have been seeing the same thing happening again with after the flood. And for those of you who's ever seen, like, one of the original horror films like Rosemary's Baby, they tell you that it still happens to this day, right? That there are still children being sired by these satanic creatures, and I believe it. So in other words, is you don't have to have a local flood to describe the presence of these giants and Nephilim, before and afterwards. And in fact, I would say that when Moshe writes that he's actually telling you. He says, they were before and afterwards. And you're like, well, how do you explain that? I think Moshe is saying the event that brought them about beforehand, guess what, guys? It happened again afterwards. And we're going to see that again with tonight with Ham and his father's nakedness, and how it's a repeated event. Like as soon as the reset happens and they get off the ark, humanity starts all over again with the seed of with Hasatan. Thus he swept away the hole that he had made upon the surface of the ground, from man to cattle and reptile and birds of the skies. Thus he swept them from off the earth. But Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained, and the waters overwhelmed the earth 150 days. But Allah Hayam remembered Noah and all the animals and all the cattle which were with him in the ark. Therefore Allah Hayam passed a ruach over the earth. And I wish I would have asked Pamela about what she wrote here about a ruach, because, I think a lot of translations would say the ruach of Allah Hayam, but she put a ruach here. So my understanding, according to this translation, is we don't know who this ruach is. We don't know if this is the ruach HaKodesh, the ruach of Allah Hayam, or some other ruach. And maybe she could throw it into the comments in there if she has any insight on that. And then I could talk about it. The waters dried. And anyways, we see something very interesting, very similar happening to Genesis 1, when the Ruach is going over the waters, and then when the land comes up out of the waters, it's the picture of the land drying, right? So this Ruach is going over the waters. They are being dried. The earth is going to appear. So we see a repeated event of Genesis chapter 1. And he restrained the outpourings from the deep. This would be Allah Hayam. He closed it up in the belts of heaven and stopped the torrents from the skies and stayed the waters from going on to the earth. And so the waters retired and diminished from the period of 150 days. Okay, Pamela, here, I'll post her message here so you guys can all see it. She said, I put Ruach because I couldn't tell. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that, she's trying to make this translation here as honestly as possible. And sometimes you just, if you don't know, you don't want to make it up. The ark then rested on the 17th day of the 7th month upon the peaks of the high hills, and the waters were retreating and subsiding until the 10th month. In the 11th month, the tops of the hills appeared. Then at the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window which he had made in the ark, and he sent out a raven, and it went, wandered, and turned about until the waters dried away from off the earth. Afterwards, he sent out a dove from him. Now, I want to talk about this, but I'm going to get through this whole section here. Afterwards, he sent out a dove from him to see if the waters had lessened from the surface of the field. But the dove found not a resting place for the sole of her foot. So she returned to him in the ark, for the waters were still on the whole surface of the earth. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her to him into the ark. He then waited 7 days longer and again sent the dove from the ark. And the dove, returning at dusk, carried in her mouth an olive leaf which had been broken off. So Noah then knew that the waters were off the earth. Waiting yet another 7 days, he sent the dove out again, and it did not return to him. Now, this right here is one of the biggest, almost like mysterious passages in Scripture, if you can believe that. And this has been, questions have abounded in rabbinical Judaism, Christianity, through all the ancient commentaries on what is going on here. And we see this contrast between these two birds, a raven and a dove. Some people have thought that the raven was evil, representing Hasatan, and then the dove, Ruach HaKodesh. Not against that view. I think that's very likely. But if you just look at this from a very practical approach, okay, the raven is it's going to be more of a scavenger. And it could have there could have been maybe still bloating corpses or flesh. We really don't know. It was without rest. It's flying around. It goes off somewhere. We don't know what happens to it, right? Well, we see the dove coming back. And when it brings back an olive branch, that's really interesting because the question is if there was a tree that it could pluck a branch from an olive tree off of, why did it not stay in that tree? Well, my understanding of doves is, I could be wrong about this. I was looking this up in the study today. My understanding is that doves, they nest, they build their nest off of twigs on the ground. And so even though there was an olive tree, the ground was still wet and muddied and there wouldn't have been twigs on it. So it was able to pull off an olive branch, bring it back. But finally, when Noah sent it the final time and it never returned, it's like, okay, the ground is good to go now because it was able to build a nest. Now, that being said, the question I have is how in the world is there an olive tree? There was one commentator, he was talking about this, and he's like, well, the waters, they went down to the treetop level and then down to the trees. I'm like, wait, what? Like a flood would take out. So you're saying that like there's whole forest just submerged under the ocean for like a year, and then the water comes down and the trees are fine with all the salt water, the waves, the tides, everything didn't take them out. I'm like, that doesn't seem very realistic to me. In fact, I would think that, when that dove, if trees were growing, they would have just been little blades of grass. And so the next question I have is, how in the world did he get an olive branch? Where's this olive branch coming from? Well, I will throw my theory out on this, that these trees, this would have been almost like another recreation events. We went through this last week, and I showed you all that there are hardly any creation words being used during the creation week. What Allah Hayam is doing is he's taking all these things in his storehouse, seeds and animals and things like that, and he's filling the earth with them. And that includes the stars. The stars may have already been there, and he just told them he's like, commands, come forward. And we see this each night, right, where the stars come forward. And the two things he did create was the sun and the moon. The trees he did not necessarily create. Well, I present to you the same idea that we are seeing we saw how it was done in Genesis 1, and we're seeing it again. So let me read to you a passage from the Targum, the Aramaic Targum, that will help convey this. And so we haven't gotten to the point in here with the planting the vineyard, but that's okay. And Noah began to be a man working in the earth. And Noah began to be a righteous man, and he planted a vineyard. And he found a vine which the river had brought away from the Garden of Eden. So it came from paradise. And he planted it in a vineyard, and it flourished in a day. And its grapes became ripe, and he pressed them out. So these grapes, it doesn't say right here in the Targum, but you just search through your extra biblical literature, and you come to learn that these grapes came from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It happened to be this tree that Hasatan planted in the garden, and it comes down. Noah knows this, but he is actually commanded to plant it, and it grows in one day. So I'm just putting this out here, that this olive tree, same story. It could have very easily just grown in a day, and we could have just seen trees everywhere, just popping up everywhere. We're seeing a total like recreation. We see that the earth purified, and then it's like fermented again, and it's ready to go. Brand new start. At the end of his 601st year, on the first day of the month, the waters dry from off the earth. Noah then loosened the hatches of the ark, and looking out, perceived that the surface of the ground was dry. And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Now, if you've ever looked at Ron Wyatt's discovery, his stuff is so like spot on. And, the archaeological world probably are seething their teeth at the fact that he discovered Sinai. I mean, they're probably seething their teeth at this. And because you look at Ron White and he is just mocked to no end. You go to the other creation site, they will mock the guy. They're like, that guy's not an archaeologist, whatever. But there are some really fascinating things about Noah's Ark, his discovery, which I want to talk about. I actually believe that it was a pilgrimage site during the Millennial Kingdom, and that there's a lot of evidence, or they scrubbed a lot of it. There was a lot of evidence for that people knew where it was up until the kingdom came to a close, and then nobody knew where it was again and was rediscovered. But the interesting thing about the Ark discovery is that he talked about how he saw the anchors for like a couple miles back or something like that. They would drop them. They would pull them off. And you kind of see something here, like it says Noah then loosened the hatches of the ark. And so they're loosening them. And then, it's finally coming to its rest, right? And I imagine it had to be, it's moving, right? It's moving along down a current. It had to be a pretty bumpy halt. They obviously weren't seat belted in, so there was probably some flying about in the rooms. Allah Hayam then spoke to Noah, saying, "Go from the ark yourself, your covenant woman, and your sons' women along with you, all the animals which are with you, of every kind, with bird and cattle, and with every reptile that creeps upon the earth. Bring it along with you, and let them breed plentifully on the land, and cover it, and increase over the earth." What is the command? Every single time there is a reset event, it is to reproduce. Every single time. We saw that with of course, Adam and his woman, and the command to reproduce. We see it here. For those of you who have been following my Millennial Kingdom research, we see that all genealogies that we know today go back to the furthest, really, to where I would place the beginning of the Millennial Kingdom. So there was a wipeout event. Genealogies go back to that. They started reproducing again. And then after the mud flood in the early 1800s, really to the late 1700s to early 1800s, we see another reproduction explosion. And it's like there was another big wipeout event in people. And, we go from, so many millions of people to billions of people within 200 years. That goes against, they show you like the charts of history, like that, like people, the world has maintained at so many millions of people for hundreds of thousands of years. And then 1800 comes along and boom, billions of people. It's like, no, I don't think so. But I would think something very similar would happen with leading up to the Tower of Babel as well. There could have been billions of people on the earth at that time as well. Who knows? And I'll get into a little bit of why I think that is. Allah Hayam then spoke to Noah, saying, "Go from the ark yourself." I read that. Okay. "All the animals with you, which are with you of every kind, with bird and cattle, and with every reptile that creeps upon the earth, bring it along with you, and let them breed plentifully on the land, and cover it and increase over the earth." Okay. So Noah went out, and his sons and his covenant woman and his sons' women with him, every animal, every bird, and every reptile creeping upon the land, according to the species, went out from the ark. Noah then built an altar to Yahweh, the ever-living, and took from every clean beast and from every clean bird and offered burnt offerings upon the altar. And Yahweh, the ever-living, perceived pleasant, sweet perfume. And Yahweh said in his heart, "Never again will I curse the ground for the labor of man, although the thoughts of his heart is wickedness from his youth. And never again will I cut off every animal I have made during the whole existence of Ha'aratz, sowing and harvest, and winter and summer, spring and autumn, and day and night shall continue." Right there, if you are ever concerned about global climate chaos, whatever they're calling it now, Yahweh, the ever-living, promises that there will be, until the end, there will be winter and summer, spring and autumn. Now, depending on where you live in the world, you might have a very long winter or a very long summer, but nevertheless, the seasons will continue until the end. Allah Hayam also, he will barak, that means to bless, I believe. Good comments, Lisa. Lisa writes here, most people mock Ron White because he was a Seventh-day Adventist, and that is 100% legit. There was several months ago, I did a lot of research on Ron White. I'm just pouring through the old videos, like that are like 15 years old and stuff like that. And every single time you have these Protestants going up there and they're like, I know Ron White was like in a cult. I'm like, what do you mean he was in a cult? And they're like, he was a Sabbath keeper, you know? And it's like, so the big crime of Ron White in the world was that he was a Sabbath keeper. And guys, I actually think, I think that was one of the reasons that Yahweh actually blessed him. I think in this last reset with the mud flood and everything, the Yahushua HaMashiach wanted to reveal these things, and he's like, look, anybody just is going to be loyal to me. Like, you got one guy out there, he's like, I'll keep your Sabbath. And he's like, all right, well, I'll let you discover all this stuff then. I really think that's, you know, the very thing that everybody despises about him is something that is, anyways, that Yah honored him. You know, I thought the same thing, and that Barak was lightning, and maybe Pamela can. Okay, here I'll put her comment up here. Pamela says Barak is lightning. Barak is Yah gifting to humans. So you're seeing maybe it's just the spelling difference between the Q and the K, and she spells it Barak with a K, and I've seen that as well. You know, Barak, lightning from the east, right? And people have commented on Barack Obama, but anyways, there it is. So he will Barak Noah and his sons and said, be prolific and increase and fill the earth. And the fear and terror of you shall be upon every animal of the land and every winged fowl of the sky, with all that swarm upon the ground. And all the fish of the waters, they shall be delivered into your hand. Every rapidly moving aquatic animal shall be food for you. I have given the whole to you like the green herbage, but the flesh with its life, its blood, you shall not eat. And also the blood of your life I will require. From the hand of every animal I will require it. And from the hand of man, even from the hand of his brother, I will require the life of man. Now, let me just finish this. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man his own blood shall be shed. Sorry, I'm reading the comments in here. Because I made man under the shadow of Alahayam, and be prolific yourselves, increase and swarm on the earth and multiply it. So, you know, a lot of people will point out that the animals here, all of a sudden they have a fear of humans. I don't really know what to make of that, guys. I really don't. I don't know if they didn't have a fear beforehand and they do now. I personally think they always did, but it is interesting that the command kind of changed, or the instructions do kind of change here from what we saw with Adam and Shua, that they were not told to. They were told they were going to work the land, and there would be thorns and thistles and that kind of stuff, and the curse of childbirth, of the pains. And I should say, not childbirth is not a curse, but the pains of childbirth. And here it kind of does change a little bit, doesn't it? And it is kind of interesting that there's a connection between Noah. He has just saved all these animals, and now he's being told that they will fear him and that he will have dominion over them. So, kind of interesting connection. Alahayam also spoke to Noah and to his sons along with him, saying, now I myself will fix a covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living animal that is with you, with bird and cattle, and with every animal of the earth with you, of all coming out of the ark, and with every wild beast of the earth. I have fixed my covenant with you, that all flesh shall never again be destroyed by a downrush of water, and there shall never again be a downrush to desolate the earth. All right, so let's read about this real quick. Alahayam. Oh yeah, let me just say too, because here we see Alahayam speaking. So when we're talking about Yahuwah the Son versus Alahayam, and I was talking to Pamela about this just to get clarification as well. We're both in agreement on this, that a lot of people will contest this and say, well, but no man has heard the Father before, right? And so it has to be Yeshua, speaking on the behalf, even if they say it's Yahuwah, right? The Yahuwah is the Father. But when Yahusha, man, all these names like Yeshua, Yahusha. When Yahusha is speaking to the Yahudim, he says, "You have never heard the Father." I mean, he's coming out like it's like you guys are the sons of Satan here, right? But it doesn't mean that nobody has ever heard the Father before. He's specifically saying that you have never heard the Father to them. Though he does say to his disciples later on, and particularly in the Last Supper, that he says that I think it's at the Last Supper, and he says that everything that he says and does, he personally learned from the Father, Allah Hayam. And anyways, Allah Hayam also said, "This is the evidence of the covenant which I have made between myself and you, and between all animal life, which is with you for every generation. I place my rainbow in the clouds, and it shall be for evidence of the covenant between myself and the earth. When there is my cloud covering the earth, and the rainbow appears in the cloud, I shall remember my covenant that is between myself and you, and between all animal life. And there shall never again be a downrush of water to sweep away all living. The rainbow shall be in the cloud and appear as an age-enduring record of the covenant between Allah Hayam and all animal life existing upon the earth." And Allah Hayam repeated to Noah, "This is the covenant which I have settled between myself and all existence, which is upon the earth." And just a quick note here that I read to you about what Yahusha said in the Book of Britain about the signs of the end time when society finally collapses. This is the end. This is the end of the era. And I believe this has happened multiple times through history, where men become women and women become men. Men are no longer masculine. Now it's, toxic masculinity. Women are no longer women, right? And roles are reversed and confused. And the symbol of this movement, of course, is the rainbow. And so it's really, really interesting here and I'm not the first to say this. This has been commented on many, many times, but I think the quote that I showed you tonight from Book of Britain, which is claimed to come from Yahushua HaMashiach, brings so much more clarity to this. I mean, he exactly describes what we are witnessing in the world around us today. And so they're basically taking the very reasons why he destroyed them and then taking the rainbow, his covenant, and making that their symbol of their rebellion that brought about their destruction before him. I mean, that's, right. Well, you guys know this. This is how perverse this truly is. I want the rainbow back. I want to be able to, dress my daughter in a rainbow or whatever, rainbow colors, and not be like, LGBTQ plus alien, whole alphabet. I need another drink here of coffee. Now the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. It's really interesting that he points that out there. These were the sons of, so it's like he doesn't even tell you the story yet. He's telling the readers, the first-time audience, and they're like, oh, he's the father of Canaan. We know about Canaan. They were about to enter Canaan, right? So he's telling you, we don't know the story yet, but he's telling you this is the father right here. Watch out for this guy. These were the sons of Noah, and from these three, the whole earth was peopled. Now, I'm going to get a little controversial with you guys here right now. And I always say I don't try to be controversial for the sake of it. It's just the way my mind thinks. I'm trying to find the book in here. I'm going to read from Jasher real quick. And we know in 1 Peter 3:20. Now, I would like to do a better study on the Greek in that. I confess that I have not, but we know in 1 Peter 3:20, Kepha says that everything with the breath of life was destroyed except for 8 souls. Now, there are some of you who are listening tonight. We've had this discussion before of, what constitutes a soul, right? Well, I am of the opinion that there were more than Noah, his woman, his 3 sons, and his 3 women on the ark, and that there were more than them. And I'll return to this verse right here after reading this. So this comes from Jasher. So it's very clear that the writer of this book believed that there were more than Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and daughters on the ark. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, here it is. And at the revolution of the year, when a full year was completed to Noah's dwelling in the ark, the waters were dried from off the earth, and Noah put off the covering of the ark, At that time, on the 27th day of the second month, the earth was dry, but Noah and his sons and those that were with him. So Noah and his sons and those that were with him did not go out from the ark until Yahuwah told them. And that day came that Yahuwah told them to go out, and they all went out from the ark, and they went and returned everyone to his way into his place. And then it says, and Noah and his sons dwelt in the land that Elohim had told them. So it gives you right there a contrast that these people left the ark and they all went their way back to their respective land, whereas Noah and his sons stayed in a different place, right? So right there in Jasher, as far as I'm concerned, it couldn't be any more clear. There were more people on the ark. Okay, so what's going on here? Why is it that Moshe is now saying that the whole earth was peopled from these three sons? Well, I think it's a similar passage to Elohim saying that you have dominion over the animals now, right? It's like they came on the ark, you saved them, you have dominion over them now. Not saying that they didn't beforehand, but we saw how it was different from the command with Adam and Chua. Well, my understanding is that Noah and his three sons, they were basically, his three sons were given the whole portion of the earth. They were the kings of the earth. Shem had his section, Ham had his section. We're going to go over that tonight. At least we'll see, the book of Jubilees does a better job describing all the boundaries. Japheth basically goes up to like Europe and the Ashkenazi, the whole like Germany and the Black Sea and even into Turkey in there. And then Ham had Africa, and then Shem had out to Asia, if I'm not mistaken on that. I could be wrong, but I think I don't have the scripture in front of me, but I think that's what they had. And so what happened is that Ham then went around usurping all the thrones. And if you recall my study on all of Ham's children, it's a YouTube video, it's a paper you can read. And I show from the book of the travels of Noah into Europe, where it chronicles Noah doing this exact same thing, where he's setting up all of his three sons, their children, as kings over, Italia and France and Africa and Asia and all that stuff. And then Ham, who is also Pan, the Pan man, he's going around and he's learned the mastery of magic. He's the one that, passes it down to Nimrod. Of course, he learns it from, he and Nimrod learned it from Cain, the Ruach of Cain. Long story short, all right, that's what I think is happening. So I think that all these other people on the ark, there were a group of people that were allowed to go on. They repented, they believed, whatever it was, but they were subservient to Noah and his three sons. Noah and his three sons were the patriarchs of all humanity, and through them would all be all people. So hopefully everyone understands that. Let me read. This is where, if I have time tonight, I want to read from this entire chapter from the book in the Kolbrin. And I will even bring up the words on the screen later if we do have the time. And I want to see here, let's see. You know what? I'll just save that for later. But it's a great chapter and we'll get through it. And it talks also about the very person who financed, Noah had a financer who actually, Noah went and gave his proposition. He's like, look, the creator of all, he told me to build this huge ark to save humanity. And this king said, okay, go down to the shore, to the ocean and build the ark and I'll supply you everything you need. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Elohim, he told me go up to the mountaintops and build it. And the people just start laughing. They're like, this dude's crazy, right? And they go out there and mock him. But the king still says, no, I'm gonna support you and supply you. And because of that, he helped them with the timber, he helped them cut it down, that kind of stuff. Because of that, he and his children were allowed to go on to the ark. Really interesting story. So you can take that with a salt shaker if you want, and we'll cover that later tonight. All right, Noah then became a farmer and planted a vineyard, and drinking of the wine, he became drunk and was naked in his tent. This is what we went over earlier, the vine that came, the grapes that came down from Eden. And by the way, I know that says that in the Aramaic Targum. This is one of those things where you will find the same thing in Christian literature as well. There are books of Christian tradition and rabbinical, or if you want to call it that, or Judeo-Christian, that all talk about this vineyard that came down from Eden that Satan planted. And I love it when you get both traditions coming together and saying, yes, this is true. So he planted it, grew in a day. He gets drunk on it. He's naked. What's going to happen? Oh boy, here we go. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and reported it to his two brothers outside. Now, we've been through this as a group. You guys know this by this point. I've been over this so many times. I am of the opinion, and I think I'm correct on this one. Well, many times it's an opinion, but I think this is absolutely correct, that if we want to use anything to define what's happening, we use the Torah. Moshe basically, he gives you these innuendos that, if you don't read the rest of Torah, you're not going to understand what he's describing. His father's nakedness was Noah's wife, right? So basically, Ham goes in there and sleeps with Noah's wife. I do not, and I say Noah's woman because I don't believe this was Ham's mother. It could have been his mother, and that's part of Nimrod magic, to actually sleep with your mother. That's the whole Semiramis storyline. It is possible that he is sleeping with his actual mother. But Naomi, Ham's mother, I don't believe she went on the ark. I think she died before the flood, and this is the mother of Shem and Japheth. All right, so they are half brothers. So now he goes to his father is incapacitated. It's actually, I actually think he may have been in a sleep paralysis at the time, and Ham kind of came in the room, kind of like a demonic type of creature in a way. I've quoted in other studies on this with Noah that he actually knew what was happening, but he was unable to move. And it actually describes like a sleep paralysis situation. And many people talk about sexual acts that happen under sleep paralysis. So he's able to go in there, and now he's going to his brothers and being like, I'm the man. I've usurped your father, Noah. I'm in charge now, right? I'm going to, and we see him going all over the earth doing this. So let's keep reading. Shem and Japheth, however, when they hear about this, that Ham's in control now, they take a shawl and they spread it over their shoulders, and going backwards, they cover the nakedness of their father. And of course, the nakedness of their father is their mother. And their faces were turned away. And of course, I don't think they looked on their father's nakedness either. They didn't look at either one of them. And their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's shame. So when Noah woke up from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him, keep in mind, he knows. How did he know what happened to him? I mean, maybe his sons reported it. Obviously, they would have, right? But we really don't know how he knows. It's not really expressed to us here. He said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, let him be to his brothers." Like, say what? So it says right here, even in Pamela's translation, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants, let him be to his brothers." All right. Now you could say that this is Ham's other future sons, but I think he's actually talking about the fact that Noah is looking at Canaan, and because Canaan came through Shem and Japheth's mother, Canaan is now the brother of I can't even say all their names, Shem and Japheth. And in a way, Noah now has 4 sons. Because of this action, Noah never would have been able to sleep with his wife again. He never would have had intercourse with her. The studies I've shown that when this happens, he would have set her aside as a wife. He would have, I'm still taking care of her, but not in that same manner. But I also do believe that this probably could happen years or decades later. We don't really know how far later, and that it is very possible that Noah and his wife actually had other sons and daughters. In fact, the Travels of Noah to Europe says so. They said that before this happened and after the flood in between, they actually had other sons and daughters that were also given kind of subsections of the inheritance of the three patriarch brothers. All right. He also exclaimed, Yahuwah, the living Allahaya, that caught me off guard there, Allahaya, Baruch Shem, or so bless Shem, and let Canaan be a servant to him, right? So this goes further to say, it's re-emphasizing. He said, let him be a servant to his brothers, let him be a servant to Shem, his brother, and let Canaan be a servant to him. Allahayam will extend Japheth, but he will dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. So this is what I said earlier, that again, we have another reset event. Same thing happens all over again with Hasatan. And of course, my theory, my belief, according to the writings of Abraham, other sources, that Ham is of the lineage of Cain. It makes perfect sense as to why Moshe is putting together a family fabric, a quilt, and showing both lines from Cain through Seth, and they come and converge back through Naomi and Methuselah with Lamech, and then and with Noah, and they converge. And I kind of suspect that, I had to put a lot of thought into this because I had put all this research into serpent seed, and I'm like, well, how did this work? If the millennial kingdom physically happened, I'm sorry if some of you are tuning in because this does happen and people are like, what is he talking about? The millennial kingdom happened. It's been like my research for like the last 3 years at this point, that it physically happened and that we're being lied to about it. And I'm like, well, if the millennial kingdom happened, then how in the world do we have, these serpent seed type of figures ruling the earth? What does this all mean? And I just think that it happened again. Some people will mock that idea, but Moshe tells us that he says the Nephilim. I couldn't even say it. I'm live. Like I blank out. The Nephilim were before the flood. They were wiped out. And then they came back after the flood. Well, how that happened? He doesn't need to tell us. He already told us it happened with the Watchers. It happened again. And it happens again. It keeps repeating. It just keeps happening. And like I said, the Anunnaki, I believe that they're probably hundreds of thousands of years old, happened in the last time. And it just keeps happening again and again and again and again. Noah lived after the deluge for 350 years. So all the lifetime, I was just reading your comments there. Okay. So all the lifetime of Noah was 950 years when he died. All right. I need to get a move on this, or else I'm not going to finish this tonight. Power reading time. I got to get through all these names. I'm going to try the best I can not to butcher this. Now these are the registers of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, for they had sons born to them after the deluge. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, that's where we get Magog, and Mediah, and Yawan, and Tubal, Meshach, and Thuyaras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, this is where we get the Ashkenazi, the Ashkenazi Jews. They are through the sons of Japheth. They are not through the sons of Shem. They are not Semitic. So when they call you anti-Semitic for pointing out the fact that they are not Semitic, it's like you're supposed to take that as an insult. But it's like, well, kind of what I'm saying. I'm saying they're not Semitic. So, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Path, and Thuga Ramaha. I'm so sorry, guys. And the sons of Yatwan. This is why it's good to have paper in front of you so you can follow along. Go, what is this guy saying? And the sons of Yatwan, Al Yashaha, and Thurashayash, Kathuyam, and the Dadanuyam. From these, they spread themselves over the sea coasts of the countries of the nations, each with their language amongst Hagayuyam, the Gentile tribes, okay, the Goyim. All right. Now, notice here that it says how they spread themselves over the sea coast of the countries of the nations, each with their language. And you're like, wait, what? I thought the languages weren't divided yet. And this is where the way Moshe writes, like he keeps reiterating and clarifying, and he goes forwards and backwards. And so Pamela agrees too that the languages were not divided at this time. So this would have been after I'm under the impression after the Tower of Babel incident, even though the Tower of Babel incident was a rebellion against all the nations that they inherited. So they inherited the nations, they went out, but then a group of them from all these nations came together to rebel against that. And the sons of Ham were Cush and Matzarim, that would be Egypt, and Phawat and Canaan. And the sons of Cush were Sabaa and Chawayalaha and Ra'amaha and Sabat Huka'a. I hope you guys are enjoying me struggling in front of you guys to say all this. And the sons of Shaba'a and Dedan. To Cush was born Namarad, that would be Nimrod. Wild beasts began then to infest the earth. On that account, he became a powerful hunter in the presence of Yahuwah. Therefore it is said, like Namarad, a mighty hunter before Yahuwah. And the capitals of his kingdoms were Babel and Iraq and Akkad and Kalanuha in the bushland. From that land, he proceeded to Asher, and he built, that would be, I'm assuming Nineveh here, it's Nayunuaha, and I think that's Nineveh. And the town of the plains and Kalak and Rasan between Nineveh and Kalak, which is a large city. I also point out here, I could be completely wrong about this, but one of the problems with the book of Jasher that's pointed out is, you guys know, I think that the timeline I go with is the LXX. I think that is the most accurate timeline. It adds a couple thousand years to history, which is a huge problem when you have books like the Writings of Abraham and Jasher, which pits Abraham up against Nimrod, when Nimrod should have been dead hundreds of years before Abraham was born. And you're like, what's going on? But I actually think that this mystery plays into the mysteries of Semiramis and Nimrod, the mysteries of Babylon, in which there was a succession of actually 4 Nimrods. And I don't know if each one of them married Semiramis, but it appeared within 2 or 3 generations that did happen. The original Nimrod would have been called Nimroth the Giant, according to ancient historians. He was the one that built the tower. Nimroth the Giant would have been dead long before Abraham came along. Abraham would have encountered the 3rd Nimrod, not the second one. He encountered the 3rd, and then the 4th Nimrod would have been the one that Esau went up against. All right, so take that with a grain of salt. I have a research paper on that. I recommend you check it out or watch the video to see if I'm correct. I mean, I'm not making that up. I'm pulling it from old sources, and they were dealing with the same thing, and they were actually looking at this Jewish literature as well, and they were like, yeah, this is true. Abraham really did go up against Nimrod, but Nimrod was dead. So and this is where you have, the origins of sun worship and fire, right? The sun is the father, the avatar, that moving on generation to generation. The way they were doing that was through the mother. The mother would sleep with her son, and they would become husband and wife, and then they would have a son, rinse and repeat. It's disgusting and gross, but it's all a part of the Nimrod magic of doing that. And that's why I suggested that perhaps Ham did maybe sleep with his actual physical mother. All right. You got to love these family discussions. It's Sabbath. You don't hear this in church groups. The Matzarim also produce the La Wa Dayam and the Anu Mayam. So these are the Egyptians producing these people, and the Laha Bayam and the Nafa Thukaim. And can I just skip all this? And Fathu Rasayam and the Kasalak, from whom sprung those are the Philistines, and the Kappathurayam. And to Canaan was born Sidon, his eldest, and Chath, and Yabawasaya, and the Amariah, and the Gargashaya, and the Chauaya, and the Araquaya, and the Sayanuya, This is going to be a fun year, guys. And the Chamathuya, and each spread themselves as the tribes of the Kanu Ainuya. And the boundaries of these were, I guess, the Canaanites, right, are from Zidon by the valley of Geraraha to Izaha along the valley of Sodomaha. That would be the valley of Sodom. And Amorah would be Gomorrah. So, and why is, Moshe so interested in the boundaries here, right? This is what they're going to come in and take. And the boundaries of, so from Sodom, Gomorrah, and Adamah, and Zabayam and Lashay, these are the sons of Ham and their tribes and languages and the regions of the heathen, of the Goyim. So you don't want to be a Goyim. You don't want to be a Gentile. Those are the heathens. When I see, Christians boast about how they're a Gentile, it's like, you might as well just say you're a pagan. I mean, And Sham, the elder brother of Japheth, also produced. That's a good thing. He had some children. He was occupied. He was the father of all the sons of Abar. The sons of Shem were Ialam and Asher and Arpachshad and Leud and Aram. And the sons of Aram, Ayutz and Shaul and Gather and Mash. And to Arpachshad was born Shalach, and to Shalach was born Abar, and to Abar were born two sons. The name of the first was Phalag. That would be Peleg, because in his days the continent was split up. Now, I asked Pamela about that because, what her opinion is. I can't remember what she actually said. It seems to be like you can translate it either way. I'm of the opinion that we're not actually seeing an actual Pangea being broken up, the continents drifting. I don't really see a need for that because the flood would have already done that. It would have just devastated and destroyed and changed everything. Even though I won't get into the moon map for you guys tonight. That's just a whole different a diversion. But I see it as when it was in his days that the land was split up between all the sons of Noah. All right, that's the way I take it, and it makes the most contextual sense in this chapter. It seems like a really weird little phrase that goes completely against what they're actually talking about, the land boundaries, borders. But it seems like it could be translated to be the land was split up. So, for those of you who are holding out on that, there you go. And his brother's name was Yakutan, and to Yakutan was born Alama Uadad, and Shalaf, and Chatza Ramawath, and Yarak, and Heda Yoram, and Alzal, and Dakulaha, and Ayubal. I bet these people all spoke like in their throat. Like it was, like they would say this and it would sound threatening, like really badass, And Abayamal, and Shaba'ah, and Awafar, and Chawayalaha, and Yawabab, and these were sons of Yakutan, and they populated from Masasha'ah by the valley of Safraha, a mountain of the east. These are the sons of Sham by their tribes and by their languages and their countries among the Goyim, the heathen. The above were the families of the sons of Noah, and their descendants by tribes. From them they spread themselves amongst the nations of the earth after the flood. All the country was agreed for settled objects, but some of them marching from the east arrived at a plain in the bushland and halted there. Now, okay, let me finish this. Then each said to his neighbor, "Come, let us set to work making bricks and see that they are properly burnt. And bricks shall serve us for stone and petroleum for mortar." So they agreed, "We will build here for ourselves a city and a tower whose head shall reach unto heaven. Thus we will make a beacon for ourselves, so that we may not be scattered over the surface of the country." All right. So here we see the original Tower of Babel rebellion. And I remember when I was really into like end times prophecy 20 years ago, and I started discovering the EU headquarters in, I think it's in Brussels, and they made it look like a reconstruction of the famous painting of the Tower of Babel to be very brazen. I mean, it's so obviously brazen that they are saying we are repeating what they did and that Elohim cannot stop us. Well, we are actually seeing the fruition of that to this day. For those of you who just follow some of these, news videos out there on social media about all these militant age 20 to 30, 40-year-old men with no women are coming off in boatloads by the hundreds and thousands and invading whole towns in Europe. And it's obviously a complete plan to mix up the nationalities. Let me actually read this. So you guys saw that, society collapses when the family falls apart and men and women lose their respective roles. Here's another quote. This one is again from the Book of Britain, and it talks about. Oh man, now I don't know where this is. Oh man, I'm gonna have to find this later. Oh, I can't stand when that happened. Okay. Well, this talks about that man, it was such a good quote too. Unbelievable. Okay. Well, here it is. If there is anything more powerful than fate, it is the courage that bears whatever fate decrees unshaken. The dispensations of life favor the courageous man. Within the wider world, responsible procreation and selectivity play a spiritualizing role, while on another level, they preserve the diverse racial and cultural heritages. Racial pride is a positive quality which has nothing to do with racial prejudice. It means that just because you have pride, or you could substitute pride with chivalry, and or recognizing the goodness in something. That just because you recognize the goodness of your culture and your people and your race does not make you a racist. All right. And it's almost like it's flipped today, that like you have to have, as you guys know, like white guilt, right? If you're a heterosexual white male, you might as well just jump off the next bridge that you come to, right? And anyways, pride without prejudice should be the watchword. It actually goes on, but I really like this when the, let's see. Yeah, they go on and on talking about this, but the idea is that many societies actually collapse when you start destroying your heritage, your history, and so on and so forth, and you start bringing in all these other people who don't speak the same language. And there's something very important about a nation having a distinct language, and this was set up, guys, by Yah. Like we can argue against this and say this isn't good, but it's like no, like this was set up by Elohim, actually Yahuwah. Actually, we'll see here. He set this up so that he's like, okay, this didn't work. I gave you guys these borders. In the Torah, we read that you do not move the boundary marker of your neighbor, right? That's what they were doing. It was mostly, as we see here, it was the sons of Ham. I mean, Nimrod is the son of Ham. They're coming in, they're moving the boundary marker, say, we want this for ourselves. And Yahuwah is like, okay, this isn't working, so I'm going to give you guys your own language. And that will keep you to your own borders. We see that today they are challenging that. It's still not working. They're bringing in all these people, spilling them into all these different cultures. They can't speak the same language. They're destroying the heritage, and they're bringing down free society. It's brilliance from a Trojan horse perspective, and we see it happening before our very eyes. Anyways, what do they say here? But Yahuwah, so he's the one taking action. We see Elohim making a lot of decrees and commands, but he's the one that comes down and does it, right? Yeah. But Yahuwah came down to inspect the city. Isn't that interesting? It actually says that he came down and he inspected the city. What does that look like? Was he in the clouds? Was he moving amongst the ranks? Was it like an angel? What did this look like? Did he look like Yahushua HaMashiach just walking through the streets? He's coming down to inspect the city, and we'll see this later with Sodom and Gomorrah. And the tower which the sons of men had built. And Yahuwah has said, you see, all these people are united in the same purpose. I'm guessing he's speaking to the divine council now. He's come down and inspected. He's personally giving his report to the council and maybe even Elohim. You see, all these people are united in the same purpose, having to all one lip And having begun to do this, they will not be restrained from anything they determine upon. So to answer your question, if you think they did have different languages, he says right here, they all had one lip, all one language. I will go down and frustrate their design so that one will not listen to another's proposals. So Yahweh scattered them over the surface of the whole country, and they abandoned the building of the city. They therefore called its name Babel, confusion. Because it was there that this chief confused the designs of all the country. And it's interesting, the root of Babylon is confusion. And then, of course, the mysteries of Babylon. And it basically, I would say the same thing, that it actually confused the mysteries of heaven, right? Thus, from there, Yahuwah scattered them over all the surface of the land. All right, reading on the history of Sham's descendants. These are the genealogies of Shem. Shem was 100 years old when Arpachshad was born to him, 2 years after the deluge. Shem then lived after the birth of Arpachshad 500 years and had sons and daughters born to him. And Arpachshad lived 35 years and then had Shalach born to him. And Arpachshad lived after the birth of Shalach 443 years and sons and daughters were born to him. And Shalach lived 30 years when Abar, got some lightning hitting outside. Shalach lived 30 years when Abar was born to him, and after the birth of Abar, Shalach lived 403 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Abar lived 34 years when Philag was born to him, or Peleg. Abar lived after the birth of Peleg 430 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Peleg lived 30 years, and Ra'ayuah was born to him. Philag, or Peleg, lived after the birth of Ra'ayuah 209 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Ra'ayuah lived 32 years when Shirag was born to him, and after the birth of Shirag, Ra'ayuah lived 207 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Shirag lived 30 years, and Nuka-Yuar was born to him. Shara-Yuah lived after the birth of Nukuar 200 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And he lived 29 years when Thurak was born to him, and Nuka-Yuar lived after the birth of Thurak 119 years, and sons and daughters were born to him. And Thurak lived 70 years when Avram, Nukuar, and Haran were born to him. All right. So I think we're going to end there because this will begin the next Torah portion. And I'm sorry that I butchered so many of those names. But here's what I want to do now. I purposely ended a little bit early. I got through it right when I wanted to, because I want to read for you guys another flood passage. And I think you guys are going to really enjoy this. This comes from a different perspective. So I'm going to have to stop my screen share here. It's going to go a little, you still see my pretty picture on here. And let's see if I could find it. Give me a standby here a moment. It's going to give me trouble. I knew it. I knew it's going to give me trouble. It's not going to find it. Okay, here it is. Boom. Boom, there it is. All right. This comes from the Book of Gleanings. Now, this is a book that I'm also working on editing right now. So you can see it's not finished, but this is the pretty cover, the Book of Gleanings. It looks very Lord of the Ring-ish, was kind of what I was going for. We just jumped straight into chapter 4 here. This whole chapter is on the deluge. Now, if you guys want to know, this comes from Colburn, and the Book of Gleanings means that, they are gathering information from multiple sources. All right. And the people writing this book come from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, and they claim to be followers of the Most High Father in heaven, Elohim. They say that his name is not known, which is really interesting. But they also agree that the creator Elohim is actually the Elohim of the Hebrew slaves. Really interesting stuff. And we come to learn that these same individuals, they go on to move to Britain. And that's where we pick up with the Druids and the teachings of Yosef of Ramah, of Arimathea. And we've been going over those in Book of Britain and Book of Wisdom. So this is Book of Gleanings. And this whole chapter is on the deluge. This is their perspective on it. So I'm going to read through this. Hope you guys enjoy it. It is written in the great book of the Firehawks. So there is a book they are referencing that we do not have. That earth was destroyed twice, once altogether by fire and once partially by water. The destruction by water was the lesser destruction and came about in this manner. Now, quick rehearsal here. They by this time they actually talk. Before this deluge, there was another world flood. It destroys much of the world, but not all of it. This actually lines up with Jasher. Jasher says that there was a flood that destroyed the world because of to punish the idolatry when people started to worship the image of the word of Elohim, Yahushua HaMashiach. They started making idols of him. And a third of the earth was wiped out because of this, because they were unrepentant. Well, at the time of this flood, if I had time, I would go over this too. They actually talk about the same place where they built the Tower of Babel. They built a portal up on top of it. They were hoping to invade heaven. And this was before the flood. So when Nimrod's doing it, he's taking Antiquitech from before the flood, and he's replicating it. He's learned through, Cain and through some of the, I guess you could say, ascended masters, whoever. And he's a master mason, and he's actually replicating it. So really interesting stuff that's happening. So you could you could say the same thing with the last reset event. Now we have CERN, right? CERN seems to be doing something very similar to what they were doing with the Tower of Babel, and they're, trying to pierce through the dimensions into the spiritual realm and probably conquer heaven all over again. All right. The people of those times, I guess, spumed all spiritual things. It should say spurned. I'm sorry. The R and the N became an M there. But the people of those times spurned all spiritual things. As you can see, I'm still having to edit this book. And men lived only for pleasure, caring little for the good of mankind or the future of the people. Lewdness and lies were upon the tongues of all men, and brother could not deal justly with brother. The princes and governors were corrupt, and proper tribute was not paid. The statues were held up to scorn. The lives of men were led by their desires, and they spent their days in gluttony, drunkenness, fornication, dancing, and singing to instruments of music. Kind of interesting that the statues were held up to scorn. I just saw that for the first time. I missed that before, because I'm actually hopefully presenting soon on this idea of how statues are used to usurp governments. And they're just set up that way. And we see that happening right now with like the Confederate all the white supremacists, patriarchal statues that are coming down by Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth. So it's interesting here that they talk about the statues were held up to scorn. That's really interesting. I mean, I don't like walk past statues and go just like, ooh, I feel scorn that, that statue, The land was unattended, for men dissipated their strength in unproductive lust and pleasures. Women lacked shame, for many would cast their glances after one man. Men fought amongst themselves and even slew one another because of their lust for worthless women, while the chaste women were not sought. Sounds a lot like today. Basically, they're saying that the hussies and the whores, that the slutty women get, more men, and the chaste women, the prize bulls don't want the chaste women. They were even rejected, for men declined the effort of being worthy of them in the eyes of their fathers. Wives were unhonored, and only the women of pleasure commanded the attentions of men. I mean, that sounds a lot like modern feminism right there, where, to be an actual wife, to be a wife to a husband, that is your role in the house, that you are scorned by many other women in society. I hear that from many women who choose to be a stay-at-home mom or whatever. Women were unclean and immodest, and men lay with them shamelessly in the presence of one another. If you ever read the book of Tubal Cain, which I did cover, I don't know if that book is a hoax or not, if it is original, but it talked about the same thing, that men would try to sleep with women during their menstrual period, their time, and probably a lot of sex magic attributed to that, with all the blood and so on and so forth. Old women were more lustful than the young ones. which I actually can believe. If we're talking that they're living hundreds of years old, and Yahushua HaMashiach talked about that in the books of the Nazarene as to why mankind does not live to be old anymore, because he's like, you just get wickeder and wickeder with age, and that makes total sense. And even, it's I'll tell you guys this. I used to, when I lived in Southern California, I used to live right next to a community called Leisure World, and it's like a suburban neighborhood, all walled in, and you have to be 55 or older. And I'm telling you that, like, I spent a lot of time there because I had multiple grandparents who lived there. Then my parents moved there and stuff like that. And the women, they become pretty wild out there. They have quite the reputation, much more than like 20-year-old girls. Old women were more lustful than the young ones, while virgins were seduced and corrupted in their childhood. Fathers fornicated before their sons and were admired for their prowess. And that the same Colburn would tell you, this would be the identity of a very weak individual. They made no distinction between their sons and other men, or between their wives and other women. And that's obviously complete against Torah. Deceits and violence were seen on every hand. To the east and north were high mountains upon which dwelt a tribe called the sons of Nazirah. Now, this tribe is very interesting. I don't know if these are the sons of Cain. I don't think they are. These may be the Watchers. It may be confused. I don't really know. We know that the Watchers came down on Mount Hermon. They came down a mountain, and Enoch is very insistent that they came on a mountain, and the very fact that they would be on a mountain is a sign of the gods of the Elohim, because the gods resided on the mountains. And so even here in this ancient literature, the fact that they would be talking about the sons of Nazirah, these may be the sons of Elohim, of Allah Hayam, we see in Genesis. The fact that they're in the high mountains tell us that they could be of a divine race. All right. They're called the men of the mountains, who were hardy men and mighty hunters. Where we read that tonight, right? Nimrod was a mighty hunter, skillful in the chase and valiant in battle. So these are the mighty men of old. The men were upright, their wives were faithful, and their sons noble. In their heart were no unworthy thoughts, no envy or hate, no malice or deceitfulness. They did not smile before a man's face, uttering smooth words. Then when he turned his back, reach out to stab him. Well, we'll see where this goes, because I thought these were we'll see. Let's just read this through. In their wives and daughters there was no impure longing, and neither cursing nor lying was heard among them. The women folk respected their men and maintained decency and decorum. I don't know, maybe this is talking about the sons of Seth, all right? Yet they were men with men's ways, abhorring all forms of unmanliness and degeneracy. Therefore, the treasures in the cities of the plains and the weakness of the people to whom these belong did not go unnoticed by the sons of Nazirah. So they said to themselves, this is exactly what the Watchers say, let us go down and let us go down. Well, it's not exactly what the Watchers, but it's pretty close. Let us go down and do a good deed among these people. Let us show them the ways of men who are strong, making them slaves and possessing ourselves of their goods. So they're coming down to, in Enoch terms, they're coming down to do good things, according to them, show the mysteries of heaven, to teach mankind. They're there to help them, but they want to rule over them, and they want to take whatever they can. We see the same thing happening here with these very mysterious sons of Nazirah. This talk continued among the men in the marketplaces and gatherings until they were stirred up to the deeds, and they gathered together a war band of fighting men. The mountain men chose leaders from among themselves after their custom and prepared to fall upon the soft living people of the plains and become their masters. And we know like the sons of Cain were camped around all the plains. And I've speculated that if modern Israel is historical Yasharel, I know probably half of my viewers would disagree with me on that. I think that there's good reason to think it is. I've talked about how, that the mountain range where the sons of Seth would be all the way north of Jerusalem, all the way down to Hebron. It's a huge, long mountain range, and that the plains surround it. And so you could see a total picture of the sons of Cain all surrounding there with their camps and their lights and their circuses and their coliseums and all that kind of stuff. When the chiefs of the mountain men saw what was happening, they became wroth and ordered their men to return to their flocks and pastures. The chief of chiefs stood up before the gathered war band and said, "It is our decree that this thing shall not be done. You must not go down from these mountains, bringing the sword to these people. Leave them alone, as rotted fruit is left on the tree to wither and die. Leave them to follow their own ways a little longer, and in the fullness of time they will destroy themselves. Make no widows among your own people. If you go down there carrying fire and sword, you may find a trap laid for you among the flesh pots. The attraction of their pleasure and the temptations of their luxury are to strong men such as you, like the lure the flame has for the moth. Do not lay yourselves open to destruction, even though the manner of its accomplishment be pleasant. If you must destroy this people, then destroy it utterly so nothing remains. They are many while we are few, and though by the keen, hard-knitting sword we may prevail in battle, yet might we not be lost under a deluge of soft feathers? Will you be wise enough to sup on milk and honey without being drowned in it?" For a time, the fighting men heeded the words of their chiefs, for they were neither willful nor reckless. But there was some men among them who went down to the plains in peace. They returned with tales of treasures and pleasures awaiting below, reporting that the time was ripe for an attack, the warmen hired by the lowlanders having departed. For in those days, the gods of Sharapik strove against the gods of Ilishdur and Ledek. Then the fighting men disregarded the commands of their chiefs, and choosing war captains from among themselves, went down and fell upon the people of the plain. The people of the plain bowed before the strength of the men of the mountains. They did not fight, for among all their possessions, they regarded their lives as the most valuable thing, precious above all else. Now, if you need caught up on what's happening, if I'm correct that this is describing the same event as the Watchers event, which leads up to the flood, we have this idea in, sometimes, things in the Bible may just say something as a matter of fact, the Watchers came down and did this. And so we think it was maybe immediate. But what if there is an air of truth to this, and we're seeing that it's progressive? We see that these men from the high mountains are coming down. They're repulsed by humanity. They see there's many things among the treasures they want for themselves. They're speaking to the kings, and the kings are like, no. I know these are an effeminate people, but just let them be. And, but it seems like they're kind of showing them things or teaching them things. You guys see how this is working out, right? It's over an extended period of time. It didn't just happen like overnight. Like it wasn't like the UFO, the mothership came down and, all hell broke loose right away. The people of the plain bowed before the strength of the men of the mountains. They did not fight, for among all their possessions, they regarded their lives as the most valuable thing, precious above all else. This is like the greatest insult that the Colburn could write, to say that your life is, that you're not going to fight because your life is so precious that your family is not. Like at this point, the family was, they had the liberalism, the feminism, men were women and women were men. They were all confused, and they obviously, in the confusion, they were worshiping this themselves, right? That's what all of this is with transgenderism. It's the worship of the self. They said, "Take whatever we have, our riches and harvests, the treasure things from our dwellings, even our daughters, for your amusement, but leave us enough that we may live under your shadow." The sturdy men of the mountains were sickened by these half men who had lived for 3 generations without fighting, and they despised them. The battle-hardened men who had come down from the highlands took whatsoever they desired. The plainsmen demurred, but because their stomachs turned to water before the virility of their conquerors, their protestations were words of wind. The victors clothed themselves in plundered finery and indulged themselves in the wines and delicacies of the food tables. They're helping themselves to whatever they want. They slept in beds of luxury and dissipation, every want being attended to by the vanquished. They learned the ways of sensuality, which goes with soft living. And when sated with natural pleasures, some lightened their boredom with unnatural ones. The mountain men saw that the women of the cities were beautiful, but they were not modest, casting their charms before the masters unashamed. So it followed that they were taken when required and treated as chattels. The women did not complain, though hitherto they had stood equal with their menfolk. But women's equality with half men is not something of value. Ouch. So it's basically saying here in modern terms that these women were as feminist as you come, and they were claiming an equality with men, that the men were, and it's saying like, yeah, okay, fine. They were, and the writers is agreeing, yeah, they were equal to men, but they were half men. They weren't whole men. So that's not something of, not something to boast or brag about. These were very effeminate men, men who were being ruled over. With women like this, the men placed no restraint on their lust and went from excess to excess. The women, rejoicing in the strength and vigor of the men, said among themselves, "Here are men indeed, such as we have not known before." Then, in the manner of women, they turned away from their own men and from the households of their husbands and fathers. So, like I said, many already married women ran off with these mountain men, who I think are the watchers. For now, they despise them. They threw off all womanly restraint and grappled with the victors like ravening beasts. And the strong were vanquished by weakness. Always do women... making sure that was showing. Always do women behave thus when their menfolk are defeated in battle. It is for this that men fight. I was actually talking to Pamela about not this passage, but this idea that when men would go in and conquer a city in the old days, the women would put on their makeup, and they would hang out the window, and they would try to grab, because their men died in the battle and they need a protector. And this is one of the commands in Torah that if you're going to take a woman home, you have to shave her, and make sure so many, I think it's like 3 months or something like that goes by, and make sure they're in the covenant with Yahuwah and okay with it, all that kind of stuff. None came to do battle with the victors, for they who had fought for the gods had destroyed themselves, and in the fullness of time the victors too were destroyed by the flesh pots, but by fornication and drunkenness, by ease and luxury. Their fighting strength and valor departed with the passing years. They grew fat and slothful. They who had come down in manly array to fight and win, who could not be challenged in battle by the lesser men of the plains, were eaten up in the mansions of pleasure and the drinking booths with music, wine, and fine linen. So it seems like even these rulers who came down and defeated a lesser people, a half men, people who, weren't warriors, they in turn kind of started becoming like the people they had conquered, I guess. Upon the mountain and in the mountain homes, there was weeping and sadness among the women. Fields were untilled and cattle strayed away. Sheep went unplucked. The best craftsmen were gone, and few remained willing to learn their skill. The teachers of learning taught no more. The gnarled hand that had wielded the sword and terrorized the foe now plucked the strings of psaltery and lyre. The rough jerkins and corselets were cast off, and now garments were of fine linen dyed purple and crimson. Men arrayed their softening bodies in gaudy attire and bathed in scented waters. Men bathing in scented waters. They rejected. I like a nice scented bath once in a while. I'll admit to that. They rejected their own women for those of the cities whose hands and feet were stained with bright colors and whose faces were marked with blue. And according to Enoch, it was Hasatan, actually Azazel, who introduced the makeup to them. But if you read other texts, he actually, before the watchers came down, Azazel was already there. He introduced this kind of makeup to the women to have them actually seduce the watchers. One day from afar off came 3 men of artists, their country having been stricken by a mountain burst. They were worshippers of the one Elohim, whose light shines within men. And when they had lived in the 2 cities for a number of days, they were stirred up in heart because of the things they saw. It kind of reminds you of Sodom and Gomorrah a little bit, right? Now, there were 3 men, but actually only 2 entered the city. If you recall, the third gave the notice of Abraham going to have a child and then went back to heaven. So they called up their Elohim to see these evil things. Their Elohim sent down, and this is, of course, the one Elohim. This would be Allahayam, right? Or you could say Yahweh. We don't really know. Their Elohim sent down a curse upon the men of the cities, and there came a strange light and smoky mist, which caught the throats of men. All things became still and apprehensive. There were strange clouds in the skies, and the nights were hung with heaviness. Many days passed before a north wind came, and the skies cleared. But then, when women conceived, they bore devils. Monstrosities came forth from their wombs, whose faces were terrible and whose limbs were unproportioned. Now, this again, just reminding us that, the women with the watchers, they bore giants, right? Now, this is saying that these women bore devils. And, of course, the Nephilim became devils, right? Became demons. They're unclean Ruachoth. They went on living, even though their bodies were destroyed. They're the undead. In those days, men knew the art of working clay and making linen in bright colors, and also the use of eye paints. This is, of course, lining up with Enoch. They had knowledge of herbs and magic, of enchantment, and the wisdom of the book of heaven. That's interesting, right? The mysteries of heaven. They had knowledge of the wisdom of the book of heaven. The knowledge of signs and omens, the secrets of the seasons, of the moon, and the coming of the waters. The remnants of the sons of Nizirah remained upon the mountains in which are against Ardis, by the land about the encampment of Lamach. In Ardis, there were wise men filled with the inn. I guess that looks like another thing I need to kind of work on there, of wisdom, I guess. The inn of wisdom, who read the book of heaven with understanding and knew the signs. Wow, so there was actually this book, the book of heaven. You have to wonder if that was written by Enoch or Adam, or we don't really know. They saw that the deeds of men in all the lands about the mountains had brought them to their hour. Then the day came when the lady of the night changed her garment for one of a different hue, and her form swept more swiftly across the skies. Her tresses streamed out behind in gold and copper, and she rode in a chariot of fire. The people in those days were a great multitude, and a loud cry ascended into heaven. That's just a weird passage, and I love it. Maybe I'll find more references to the Lady of the Night and her chariots. I don't know. I mean, is that the moon? Are we talking about the moon there? Because we know that, I've seen passages talking about the moon and a chariot, Lady of the Night. I don't know. Then the wise men went to Sharapik, now called, we're getting to the flood here real quick. I'm going to try to pick this up. Then the wise men went to Sharapik, now called Serapish, and said to Sesuda the king, behold, the years are shortened and the hour of trial draws nigh. The shadow of doom approaches this land because of its wickedness. Yet because you have not mingled with the wicked, you are set apart and shall not perish. This so your seeds may be preserved. So here's the king who's going to finance the building of the ark, right? So he too has not, they say here, to answer your questions, because I'm going to get asked this. They say, you have not mingled with the wicked, you are set apart. All right. Then the king sent for Hanok, that would be Enoch, but this Enoch is not the Enoch we know. This is actually the Noah figure. So this Noah in this book is called Hanok or Enoch, son of Hogaratur. And he came out of Ardis, for there he had heard a voice among the reeds saying, abandon your abode and possessions, for the hour of doom is at hand. Neither gold nor treasure can buy a reprieve. I'm wondering if this king is actually also actually lined up with Seth. And we know that Enoch was made king, and then his son was also made king of the whole earth, according to Jasher. So I don't know. I don't know if there's actually a relation here to that. And this is why maybe he knew to call on Noah. Then Hanok came into the cities and said to the governors, behold, I would go down to the sea and would therefore build a great ship, that I may take my people upon it. With me will go those who trouble you. And isn't that interesting? The righteous people, those who trouble you, those are the righteous people. I'm going to take them with me. And they will take the things which cause you concern. Therefore, you will be left in peace to your own enjoyment. And it's like they're going to die, but they'll be left to peace, to what the things they enjoy. They will not be troubled by the prophet anymore. The governor said, "Go down to the sea and build your ship there, and it will be well for you go with our blessing." But Hanok answered, "It has been told to me in a dream that the ship should be built against the mountains, and the sea will come up to me." When he had gone away, they declared him mad. The people mocked him, calling him commander of the sea. It's kind of funny. I mean, it's not funny, but they were calling Noah commander of the sea. But they did not hinder him, seeing gain in his undertaking. Therefore, a great ship was laid down under the leadership of Hanok, son of Hogaritur, for Susuda, king of Serapesh, from whose treasury came payment for the building of the vessel. So right there, according to this book of Gleanings, we see that many people ask the question, how in the world did he get the material? How did he build it? And even answers in Genesis, if you go there, they're like, well, Noah had to have had money. That they will tell you that. Like, he had to have had money. He had to have had people helping him build it. Even though those people didn't go on the ark, apparently, he had these people build it and be like, sorry, you can't come on the ark. But according to this, we see there was a king, he financed it, and the king was set apart. He was not a wicked man at all. He actually he actually honored the Most High. It was built on the lake of Namos, close by the river of Gold, where it divides. All the household of Hanok was there, and the household of his brother, who directed the men at the task. Why am I finding this fascinating? Because, according to 2nd Enoch, Noah had a brother, and his brother's son was named Melchizedek. He was the first Melchizedek. And this Melchizedek actually ascended to heaven. And so, let's keep reading. Dwevan, captain of the ships from the land beyond Ardis, was overseer of the craftsmen. So that's interesting. So they actually brought in another ship captain to actually oversee, make sure it was built according to how it was supposed to be built. The women and children carried, and the men built. The length of the great ship was 300 cubits, and its breadth was 50 cubits. We read this earlier tonight. Lines up. And it was finished off above by 1 cubit. It had 3 stories. Read that earlier, which were built without a break. The lowermost was for the beast and cattle and their provender, and it was laid over with sand from the river. The middle one was for birds and fowls, for plants of every kind that are good for man and beast, and the uppermost one was for the people. Each story was divided in twain, so that there were 6 floors below and 1 above, and they were divided across with 7 partitions. In it were cisterns for water and storehouses for food, and it was built with ascara wood, which water cannot rot or worms enter. It was pitched within and without, for the cisterns were lined. The planks were edged and the joints made fast with hair and oil. Great stones were hung from ropes of plaited leather, and the ship was without mast or oars. There were no poles and no openings except for a hatch beneath the eaves above, whereby all things entered. The hatch was secured by great beams. Into the great ship they carried the seed of all living things. Grain was laid up in baskets, and many cattle and sheep were slain for meat, which was smoked by fire. They also took all kinds of beasts of the field and wild beasts, birds and fowls, all things that crawl, also gold and silver, metals and stones. The people of the plains came up and camped about to see this wonder. This lines right up with Jasher. Even the sons of Nazirah were among them. So if these are the watchers, were they in the earth at this time? And I know that in Enoch, it gives the sentence that they will go into the earth. But if you guys looked at my past research on this, I have really questioned if it's kind of like Yahuwah is saying, okay, you're going to be buried in the earth. We don't exactly know when that was, because it gives the same thing to Azazel. But Azazel, if he is Hasatan, he's around the earth. He's not thrown into the abyss yet. So if these sons of Nazirah are any way related to the Watchers, they're still on the earth at this time. They have not received their sentence. The book of Lamech of Cain says the same thing, that the Watchers were still ruling over the cities at this time. And they daily mocked the builders of the great ship. But these were not dismayed and toiled harder at the task. They said to the mockers, "Have your hour, for ours will surely come." On the appointed day, they who were to go with the great ship departed from their homes in the encampment. They kissed the stones, and I love this. This is like such a movie moment right here. Like if you were to make a movie about this, you would include this scene in here. They kissed the stones and embraced the trees, and they gathered up handfuls of the earth. For all this, they would see no more. They would never see this world again. This world was completely destroyed, as Kepha said. And like I said earlier tonight, that I believe that there was a replanting of the earth, maybe from paradise, from storehouses. I know they had seeds and that kind of stuff that grew, but this old world was completely destroyed. They loaded the great ship with their possessions, and all their provender went with them. They set a ram's head over the hatch, pouring out blood, milk, honey, and beer. I like that. They're claiming they had beer. Took beer onto the ark. Beating upon their breasts, weeping and lamenting, the people entered the great ship and closed the hatch, making it secure within. The king had entered, and with him those of his blood, in all 14. So that's okay. So we have in Noah's reservation and his family who have 8. And according to this, there are the king and his entourage, 14 in all. And I think that's the complete number of people. For it was according to this, for it was forbidden that his household go into the ship of all the people who entered with him. 2 understood the ways of the sun and moon and the ways of the year and the seasons. 1, the quarrying of stones. 1, the making of bricks. And 1, the making of axes and weapons. 1, the playing of musical instruments. 1, bread. 1, of making of pottery. Really, one of their life skills was bread. They got let on the ark because I don't have like nunchuck skills or anything like that, but I got bread making skills. So they nearly made it on there. But the one skill they had was bread making skill. 1, the making of pottery. 1, the care of gardens. And 1, the carving of wood and stone. 1, the making of roofs and the working of timbers. 1, the making of cheese and butter. So for those of you who have like one life skill and it's maybe something like making bread, don't ever say that you could not make it onto the ark. There is still hope. 1, the growing of trees and plants. 1, the making of plows. 1, the weaving of cloth and making of dyes. And 1, the brewing of beer. Hey, there you go. They got a brewery on that ark. 1, the felling and cutting of trees. So we got a lumberjack. 1, the making of chariots. 1, dancing. Oh, we got a dancer on there, a little ballet, huh? 1, the mysteries of the scribe. That's interesting. Well, I don't like that. So maybe I have a chance. 1, the building of houses and the working of leather. There was 1 skilled in the working of cedar and willow wood, and he was a hunter. 1 who knew the cunning of games and circus, and he was a watchman. There was an inspector of water and walls, a magistrate and a captain of men. There were 3 servants of Elohim. There was Hanok and his brother. So according to this, Noah's brother does make it on. And we have literature that specifically mentions Noah's brother. And you're like, in Second Enoch, it's like, well, that's interesting. Why would it mention his brother, right? It's the same thing. Like, why would they mention Naamah? So there was Hanok and his brother and their households, and Dwevan and 6 men who were strangers. You got to watch those strangers. Then with the dawning, men saw an awesome sight. There, riding on a great black rolling cloud, came the destroyer. What is this? This is like Nibiru coming, newly released from the confines of the sky vaults, right? So this is the destroyer that comes around every so often, and when the destroyer comes, watch out. It's about to get ugly. And she raged about the heavens, for it was her day of judgment. The beast with her opened its mouth and belched forth fire. So there is actually like a dragon arriving that comes in this spewing fire. Hot stones and vile smoke. It covered the whole sky above, and the meeting place of earth and heaven could no longer be seen. And it's interesting because there is a rabbinical Jewish literature. Like if you read what is it? The Legends of the Jews. There it is. It's getting late, guys. We publish Legends of the Jews at TUC, and they're beautiful editions put out by Rebecca. Great sources for research. And they talk about how to destroy the Nephilim, that the water that came down was boiling hot. And it actually said that it came through the fires of Gehenna. kind of interesting because here we see the same thing. We see a dragon. Well, is this dragon Sheol itself in a way? On a kind of esoteric level, are we dealing with like a Leviathan kind of creature, but out of the sky? That's belching forward this fire that's going into the water, it's burning everything up. It covered the whole sky above, and the meeting place of earth and heaven could no longer be seen. This is the same thing that happened before when I talked about how northern Africa looks like a giant dragon, and the same Book of Corbin talks about at the last destruction event that dragon, which was the size of, it would cover the whole sky, it actually was slain, and it basically became a continent. It actually says that, and so that's probably northern Africa. There were three so where was I? It covered the whole sky above, and the meeting place of earth and heaven could no longer be seen. In the evening, the places of the stars were changed. They rolled across the sky to new stations. Then the floodwaters came. Well, that's really interesting there. The stars actually changed their position, and then the floodwaters came. I wonder if the stars had to move their position to make way for the firmament to open up. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. That had to be a sight to see. And this is what I talk about too all the time, that like people look out and like, no, the stars are still there. And, according to Revelation, it's like, well, I actually think all through history, the stars can come and go, like, at the command of the Most High. The floodgates of heaven were open, and the foundations of earth were broken apart. The surrounding waters poured over the land and broke open upon the mountains. The storehouses of the winds burst their bolts asunder, so storms and whirlwinds were loosed to hurl themselves upon the earth. Wow, we've got tornadoes, we've got hurricanes, we've got everything going on. In the seething waters and howling gales, all buildings were destroyed. Trees were uprooted and mountains cast down. So that answers the question. Like when I talked earlier tonight about, people are actually saying, oh, the water came down to the tree line. No. All the tree, like you guys, if you've ever seen a flood, you've all seen footage of floods. Houses are destroyed, cars are wrecked, bridges, it destroys everything in its path. There was a time of great heat, then came a time of bitter cold. The waves over the waters did not rise and fall, but seethed and swirled. There was an awful sound above. The pillars of heaven were broken and fell down to earth. The sky vault was rent and broken. That would be the firmament. So, when people tell me, but no, the firmament, it's like, well, maybe it's broken in the past and been repaired. Because right here, it just says that the firmament, the sky vault, that's what the firmament is, guys, the sky vault. It was rent and broken, right? So the whole of creation was in chaos. The whole of creation. The stars in the heavens were loosened from their places. We just saw the stars fall out of the sky. This is Noah's flood. How are the stars going to come back, guys? Because I thought there were stars in Yahusha's day. So they dashed about in confusion. There was a revolt on high. A new ruler appeared there and swept across the sky in majesty. Well, that's an interesting line. Those who had not labored at the building of the great ship and those who had mocked the builders came quickly to the place where it was lying. They climbed upon the ship and beat upon it with their hands. They raged and pleaded, but could not enter inside, nor could they break the wood. As the great ship was borne up by the waters, it rolled, and they were swept off, for there was no foothold for them. The ship was lifted by the mighty surge of waters and hurled among the debris, but it was not dashed upon the mountainside because of the place where it was built. All the people, so that's kind of interesting thought. We never really think about that, but it's actually saying that they strategically built it knowing that these waves were going to come, this tidal surge, and that they built it strategically where it wasn't going to get bashed against the mountains. All the people not saved within the ship were swallowed up in the midst of raging confusion, and their wickedness and corruption was purged away from the face of the earth. Okay, we're almost done. Thank you guys for your patience. I hope you guys are enjoying this. The swelling water swept up to the mountaintops and filled the valleys. They did not rise like water poured into a bowl, but came in great surging torrents. But when the tumult quieted and the waters became still, they stood no more than 3 cubits above the earth. The destroyer passed away into the fastness of heaven, and the great flood remained 7 days, diminishing day by day as the waters drained away to their places. Then the waters spread out calmly, and the great ship drifted amid a brown scum and debris of all kinds. And so there's that, what I was telling you, that like when he sent out the dove, the raven did just fine amongst the debris, but the dove is very particular, and it needed to have dry soil to make its nest in the trees. It could get to the olive branch, but it couldn't really get to the ground. After many days, the great ship came to rest upon Cardo and the mountains of Ashtar against Nishim in the land of Elohim. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I wanted to read that tonight because of the Torah portions, of course. And I actually would love to do a study where I take all the different accounts of the flood from like Jasher, Jubilees, Legends of the Jews, this one, Masoretic, so on, line them all up and show them to you guys. That's all I have. It looks like I've gone just over the 2-hour mark, and I enjoyed this. Hopefully you guys will come back and do this again. Leave a comment below, say hello, shalom, whatever you'd like. And be sure to come over to Discord. If you're not a part of the community, say hi to us. And we'll do this again next Sabbath. So Shabbat Shalom one last time. Good night, everybody.